Car enthusiasts? Good, poking. I see one. Is there one back there? Eli, are you a car enthusiast? All right, good. But there's a phrase you may be aware of. If you're a car enthusiast, you're more likely to get it. But it's the word sleeper. Now, when I was in high school, I went to SIR. One time I wanted to race, and I ended up going by myself. And I took my Chevelle up. I got in line, and then I chickened out. And I was all by myself. I thought, man, I should have brought somebody. But I remember going to a couple of the races, and there was a Nova there. And from a distance, man, the Nova was just beating everybody. And the thing about the Nova is it was so quiet. It's like you couldn't hear it going down the track, but it was beating everybody. Later, it seemed like someone said, yeah, it's probably supercharged. Where I'm more the guy who likes something loud. If it's fast, that would be nice too, but as long as it's loud and has a lumpy cam, that's what I want. Something loud with a lumpy cam. You're sitting at a stoplight and it barely stays, idling. Come on, that's my dream car right there. And so that's me. But this Nova didn't have a lumpy cam. It wasn't loud. Didn't have a Flowmaster exhaust. It was just right down. It was beating everybody, supercharged. That is a great example of a sleeper. Maybe here's another one for you. How many of you remember watching there? I don't remember the name of it, but there's a drag show race on TV. And one was a guy who drove a farm truck. It's an old Chevy truck, beat up, like 76 truck, red with a canopy on it. And you pull up next to that and be like, man, this guy, he wants to race me. But the motor is just totally, out of this world. And that guy's, winning drag race after drag race. How many that is a serious sleeper? If you're like, hey, I want to, I'll put my keys down against that truck, only to find out when you actually race the guy, there's some serious horsepower underneath the hood. Now, my brother has a 69 Camaro. And so this is a 69 Camaro. This is a special Camaro. And I got to get it's a central office production order. So there was only a limited number of these ever made. And you had to call in and actually order this. What this is this is a stripped down version. Okay, there's certain emblems and packages that come with the sports package. You have an SS, you have an RS, and you have an RS SS. This here is a stripped down version. There's nothing special about it. So you could say this is a sleeper, but there is a 427 V8 big block underneath the hood. So you might think all stock, and then pull up against this guy, and you're going to find out right away there's something different about this car. Here's the thing. Things aren't always what they seem. Okay, for those of you, I'm an old school muscle car guy. For those of you that appreciate modern technology, so here's a 2008 to 2010 Audi. And you might think, well, that's a good grandpa car. Come on, right? Yeah, John, you drive that, right? Debbie? But underneath the hood of that is a V10, a motor built for a Lamborghini. So I think that thing can move pretty well. Sleeper. Here's not a car, but for those of you who enjoy music, here's a violin. So most of us would look at that violin and think that is something ordinary. There's nothing special about it. But what we don't know is that there's a story behind this violin. This was a violin from a Jewish family that were caught up in the Holocaust. And so this violin tells a story from the surface, from appearance. It doesn't mean anything. But then if you dig a little bit deeper, you begin to find out about its story. You find out that there is tragedy, that there is hope, and there is, loss, caught up in this violin story. This violin represents the story of a family, of a musical family, and something that was important to them. So isn't it interesting how in life some things just don't appear to be what they are? Above the surface, they may appear to be one thing. They may appear to be ordinary, but you get below the surface a little bit and you find out they're anything but ordinary. And I do have to give a shout out to my niece back there. She had a baby girl, Avery, and so she's making a public appearance to church today. So welcome, little Avery. Congratulations, Emily. But things aren't always what they appear. So this is the big idea behind the new series we're starting today. It's the idea of ordinary. Might think that it looks ordinary, might appear to be ordinary, but as you begin to get underneath the surface a little bit, you find out that it is not ordinary. It's anything but ordinary. So, seemed appropriate since it is Super Bowl Sunday, right? First, we got to ask, how many of you are New England Patriot fans for the day? For the day? Okay, there's more today. Mark? Man, Luke's not so excited about you being a New England Patriot fan today. But, all right, more fans than was in the first gathering. How many of you are, for today, Ram fans for the day? Okay, so, all right, how many of you don't care? Right? Just remember, this is Seahawk territory, right? That's just a reality. But with this being Super Bowl Sunday, I thought it would be appropriate to start with this thought of this idea, the concept that you and I, that we are, whether we realize it or not, we are in no ordinary fight. We're in no ordinary fight. So we're going to take a look at some scripture, and the goal here today is I want to frame some theology. I want us to have a little bit of perspective concerning this idea of a fight and this no ordinary fight and what that means for you and I. So we're going to start with some scripture to kind of help create some perspective, create some framework from which we can begin to think about theologically, okay, what is my belief? What should I believe concerning this battle? Is there really a battle, and am I to give myself to it? Okay, so we're going to begin in 2 Kings chapter 6. And so we're going to talk about language through scripture that helps create this context, this idea that you and I are in no ordinary battle. So 2 Kings chapter 6. And for those of you that have not heard, we introduced the idea of the TV. It's not to be redundant. It's not to say, hey, it's already on the big screen, why is it here? This is just to help our online presence. That's one of the things that we're working on in the next year is our online presence. And then this just kind of helps bring whatever's seen on the screen into the camera frame. And so that's the whole perspective. So don't get lost up in, should I look at this one? Should I look up there? Why don't you turn this one off? Well, we could turn off the big one, have this one, but then some people can't see it. And the whole idea is to bring it into the frame of the video, okay? So thanks for bearing with me on that. That's kind of the method behind our madness with that. So 2 Kings chapter 6. There is a king, he's the king of Syria. And the king of Syria, he's at a place and a point in his life where he's frustrated, he's discouraged. There's a problem at hand. It appears as if there's a mole within his advisory leadership. Because every time they make a move, every time they strategically prepare to make a move against Israel, it's like Israel is one step ahead. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's starting to question the reality of his own advisors. Maybe there's a mole. And so I love it. It's the idea of divinely inspired espionage. Whatever's being spoken of and said in these private meetings, somehow it's being found out. And so the king of Syria, he doesn't like it. So this is a problem. He's trying to figure out, what do I do about this problem? So he brings in some of his closest advisors and he begins to ask some questions to get to the bottom of this. And so that's kind of the context here as we turn to, Jubilee, can you bring my Bible up? I forgot to bring it up. As we turn to 2 Kings chapter 6. And I'm going to read a couple verses, but that helps to provide a little bit of context for what's going on here with the king of Syria. So he's upset, trying to figure out who's the mole. Okay, so here's the response, starting in verse 15. And it says, and when the servant of the man of God arose early, well, no, that's not it. It's right there on the screen. Do I have that one, Debbie? It's 2 Kings 6:12. Actually, it says this. Sorry. It says, one of his servants said, "No, my lord, O king, the problem is not a mole. The problem is a prophet, the prophet of God." He says, "No, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, he tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." So think about, Israel seems to be one step ahead, and it's not because of a mole, it's because of this divinely inspired espionage. The prophet Elisha, he's hearing, and he's going and telling the king of Israel what's going on, so they're always one step ahead. So that helps to create then the context for this, starting in verse 15. So the king of Syria, he then sends an army. He finds out where Elisha's at. He goes to Dothan with a big army, and this is where we pick up. Verse 15. It says, "And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with its horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, 'Alas, my master, what shall we do?'" So this is Elisha's servant. So Elisha answered and said, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people, I pray, with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Elisha then led him out of Dothan, and it's there, their eyes were open, and they threw a big feast and let him return to the king of Syria. But think about that. There was this reality of a battle going on that you and I don't always see, we're not always aware of. And what was the prayer of Elisha? Elisha, open the eyes of my servant so that he can see that there is something at work going on in a different realm behind the scenes, so to speak. So let that come into our perspective. So 2 Kings, that's the idea there. And then we look at Job chapter 2. In Job chapter 2, thanks, Pastor Skyler. In Job chapter 2, it's there that we have this conversation, this dialogue between Satan and God, where Satan's allowed to enter into the presence of God, and as he enters in, he has this dialogue with God, and it's there in Job. And basically, he asks God if he can go after Job. And so he begins to inflict certain things, sickness, boils, things happen to his skin, and so there's this this relentless release of evil upon Job, and that carries out, and God's stance this whole time is, yeah, you can go after my servant Job, but listen, he's going to remain true and faithful to me. But this helps to create perspective, right, to bring some framework, some focus into this other reality, this reality of a battle that's going on. 1 Chronicles 21:1 says, now Satan stood up against Israel, and he moved David to number Israel. The idea being that there was this evil influence, right? David had his own pride and his own issues that came into play here, but there was this evil influence behind David that influenced him toward this. And then as a result of this, it triggered a number of different consequences as a result of that. But again, perspective. In the New Testament, in Acts chapter 16, verse 25, it's a story of Paul and Silas. And Paul, he was being tormented by this gal. It says that she was paid for divination. She could, say certain things and reveal certain things. And she was paid by her slave owners to be somebody that heard things in this other realm and presented that to people. And in that sense, and it says that she was tormenting Paul, following Paul on the way to prayer, and finally Paul had enough, and he said, okay, I'm not going to take this anymore, and he told the demon, the demonic spirit, that evil spirit, to come out of that gal, and shortly after that, Paul and Silas were thrown into prison, and then there was a prison break. So we have demonic activity, then we had angelic activity involved. So this clash of in this realm of we don't always, this realm of what we don't always see. Same in Acts chapter 12. Peter's there. Peter's in prison. And there's a jailbreak, and there's an angelic host that leads him out of prison. He actually goes to a home where they're having a prayer meeting, and Rhoda's there, answers the door, and doesn't even recognize that it's Peter. She's so shocked. She shuts the door on him. And she thought that it was an angel at the door. And Peter's like, no, it's not an angel, it's me. I'm out. I shouldn't be here, but I'm here. So this activity, this angelic activity going on in these scriptures. So that's that. In John chapter 13 and 2. Think about Jesus as Jesus was being prepared to be portrayed. And it's there that we're told in John 13:2, after supper ended, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, it says that he got up and they went off to do what he was supposed to do. Notice, who put it in his mind? Okay, it was the devil who planted a seed, put it in his mind, and as a result of that, and then if you read a little bit further, it says that Satan actually entered into his life, entered into his spirit, his soul. So there was this possession thing that went on, right? There's this reality that you and I can open ourselves up to certain evil with certain decisions, behaviors, and attitudes, right? We can create this atmosphere. We can open the door. We can allow the devil to come in with a foothold, another scripture says. In John 8:44, Jesus, he describes the devil and some of his characteristics. Jesus says, you are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks lies, he speaks his native language, his native tongue, because he is a liar. He's been a liar. He will always lie. So the devil is a liar. He's good at lying. That's the only thing he can do, right? He can't tell the truth. He tell lies. That's his native language. He's the father of it. In Ephesians chapter 6, it's there that Paul encourages the church in Ephesus to consider that there is a spiritual battle going on in a realm we don't always see. He says, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of darkness and wickedness in the heavenly realm. So there's this other realm where there's a battle that goes on. And as a result of that, Paul says, you want to live for Jesus, you want to live for God, it's important that you put on the full armor of God, that you stand, that you do everything you can do to stand. And it's there that Paul describes like Roman garb, like a centurion, what he might wear, a Roman soldier. He says, put on the breastplate of righteousness. He says, put on the belt of truth. Gird your loins with truth. Put on the helmet of salvation. He says, shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Pick up your sword, which is the word of God, and the shield of faith. All of those things are important metaphors, language that describes a certain reality that you and I are to be prepared that there is this other realm, whether we see it or not, in which there is a battle going on. So that's in Ephesians. In Mark chapter 3, verses 22 through 24, it's there that some of the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they accuse Jesus of being Satan. I mean, he's doing good things. People are being delivered and set free and healed. And it's there. They say, hey, we know the problem with you. We know what it is. You're Satan. You're Beelzebub. And by the ruler of demons, you're casting out demons. And so Jesus takes their logic and says, there's no logic in this. Why would any kingdom, no kingdom can stand when it's divided. How can the devil be casting out his own devils or his own demons? Why would he do that? It makes no sense. But there is this reality, there's this activity of demons and angels. It's a part of this realm we don't always again see. It says, if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. I mean, makes sense. And then in Romans chapter 7, verses 21 through 23, Paul says this, I find then a law that evil is present with me, the one who wills to do good. For I delight in the law of God according to the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. So this speaks of another reality of a battle that goes on in the inside of us. There's an inner battle that also plays out and is very, very real. So these scriptures are just a few examples that help to frame our theology as it relates to this idea of no ordinary fight. So life, things, people, circumstances, they're not always what they seem. What we see is not always a true reflection of what is below the surface, what is going on behind the scenes in another realm. Listen, sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. So sometimes things are as they appear, and sometimes they're not as they appear. There are spiritual forces and people who want us to believe that this is no ordinary fight. Evil, it's not real. There's no evil in our world. It's all just our own decisions, and yeah, that's some of it. But it's just what it is. It's not a battle. It's not a fight. It's not worth looking into. That's why we're looking into it today. And so there are a couple things that I think we should consider as these scriptures come into focus. And the first thing is this. There is a fight within and there is a fight without. Okay, I just shared a number of different examples, different scriptures that present different realities concerning a battle. So I want to begin first with that battle within. There is a battle within. So it's interesting about the fight within. It seems to me that some people don't need any extra help. Go back. Don't need any extra help. A lot of times we do just fine on our own with bad decisions and bad choices, right? We create sometimes in our own inner world and the world we live in. We create our own chaos. We create our own drama. We create our own hardship. Let's just be honest. Sometimes we create our own evil with the decisions that we make, with the way we think and the way we look at the world and the way we treat people. And sometimes we don't need any outside influences to help us. We're just fine on our own sometimes creating that in our lives. Sometimes I hear people, they say, the devil's after me. And I have to think, really? Sometimes that could be true, or the idea of evil, but how often are we just the consequence of our own decisions and choices? It's easier to blame somebody else. It's easier to say it's his fault. Because when we do that, we don't have to look inside. We don't have to take responsibility for our own decisions, right? Our own choices. So the battle within, it involves a battle of wills. It's a battle between the flesh and the spirit. The flesh wants what it wants, and the spirit wants what it wants. So Paul says that the flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing, right? There's a clash inside of us between selfishness and sin and the Spirit of God. There's that battle, to do right, to do good, to live a wholesome, good life. And then there's that reality of a different voice, perspective that comes into play, that battle between grace and law, between religion and relationship, between intellect and spirit, between the will of God and the will of man, between faith and sight. We're called to be people who don't live by sight, but who live by faith, so that can be a struggle because we really want to live by what we see. And some people, that's all that they can live by is what they see. So that's a struggle, it's a battle within. That's why Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9, 26 and 27, he said this, he said, "So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I'm not just out there, fighting just to do it." He says, "I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified." Paul understood this idea of discipline and how important it is to our life with Christ, to getting order to our inner lives and our minds and our thinking and our behavior. So it's important that we give ourselves to certain disciplines, right? It's conducive to that lifestyle, because here's the thing. There are things that want to master us. Sin wants to master us. There are certain ideas that want to control us. And so we want to be people, though, that are not mastered, controlled by sin and things. We want to be people that live as slaves to God, right? In that sense. So I discipline my body like an athlete. So there's a fight within, and there's also this fight that happens without, that happens on the outside of us, that's external, right? So there's a real battle inside, and there's a real battle that happens outside, which includes the external forces of evil. Listen, the devil doesn't know your thoughts. He doesn't know my thoughts. But here's the reality, and he's just one person. He can only be in one place at one time. You think about that, the devil's after me. I know sometimes we use that as a phrase to personify evil, but the devil, he'd be after Jesus, right? Because he knows what's coming. But, for some of us, just the idea of him, of all the people and all the things going on in the world, he's only after me. Just think about that. Kind of brings things into perspective. Yes, there are, devils and there are, demons, demonic influences, and fallen angels. And so, he's got a horde that helps in that process. But, sometimes we use language like that. I think it's just important to think about that. But so he doesn't know our thoughts, but he does know humanity. He's had a long time to know what grabs our attention, what we're captivated by. He's been able to study us for generations and years and years and years. And so he knows our propensity towards certain attitudes and towards certain things, and especially as it relates to the big three. This, sex, power, and money. And so he knows how to He knows how to throw out, the right temptation and influence in the right ways, at least evil does, in terms of influencing people, humanity, mankind. So there is that reality. So there's a reality of an evil that stands behind humanity, influencing humanity. It says there again that Satan entered into Judas for the purpose of betraying Jesus. Satan was the source behind the evil that came into Job's life. Now, here's the thing. You need to hear me on this. Not all sickness is related to demonic activity. But there are evidences in the Bible of some that seem to be related to demonic activity. In the story with Job, in that story, it's directly related to that. There was, infirmities and certain afflictions that came as a result of evil being manifest in that way. So it's important that we realize that. Not all sickness is, but sometimes there just seems to be certain things that happen in our lives. You kind of put the dots together, you look at the footprint, the imprint upon it, and you come to some conclusions. Yeah, maybe there's something behind the scenes influencing this. Come on, how many know what I'm talking about? And sometimes we're not aware of it, and sometimes we become aware of it, and we become aware of it. Why? So the purpose of engaging and being able to say, okay, no, I'm putting my foot down, right? As we become aware of it. So there are examples in the New Testament where, again, sickness seemed to be linked to demonic activity. Mark chapter 5, with the man who was demon-possessed, and it says he was, he couldn't be tamed. He was like a wild animal one day, and the next day he was in his right mind, and he was a completely different person. Jesus healed him. Again, in what is it, 2 Chronicles or 1 Chronicles 21, it says again that Satan stood against Israel, so that idea of resisting movement, resisting God's plan, okay, so that was real. The devil was tempted Jesus in the wilderness. Adam and Eve in the garden. Matthew 4:3 says that Satan is referred to as the tempter. He knows, again, the right hooks. He knows how to tempt us, to lure us in, to pull us in. Acts 10:38 says how God anointed Jesus with the Holy Spirit and power, doing good and healing all those oppressed of the devil. Right? Oppression, heaviness is real. And that oppressive work that the devil came to do is doing in our world. It says that Jesus came to destroy that. That is his purpose for coming, right? To free us, to enable us to live the life that God says that we can live in Christ. So the evil that stands behind humanity, listen, it's destructive, it's relentless, it's oppressive, and it's no respecter of gender, it's no respecter of demographic or ethnicity or personality. Peter describes this evil as walking about like a roaring lion, seeking whom it may devour. 1 Peter 5:8. So there's a battle within and there's a battle without. 1 John 3:8 says the Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works, the activity of the devil, of the evil one. So as we bring this idea into focus, it's important to realize that there's a battle within and there's a battle without. Secondly, we need to realize that there are two realms and both are real. There's a realm that you and I see. There's a realm that is natural, the realm of what we see, what we taste, and what we feel. And then there's another realm that isn't always all that visible. Things going on in a realm that we don't always understand or see or know what's going on. But we do know that there's a battle, a clash, if you will, between kingdoms, mindsets, perspectives, love and hate, joy and pain, peace and slavery, prosperity and bondage or poverty. There's this reality that there's this battle going on in this other realm. Again, Elisha prayed that the eyes of his servant, that his eyes would be open to be able to see into this other realm. And then his eyes were open and he saw that he was surrounded by chariots of fire and horses and realized there that there were more that were for them than there were those that were against them. Lastly, here's the other thing that I think is important to bring into perspective. Evil propagates one agenda in its many forms. So evil propagates one agenda in its many forms. God has a plan, evil has a plan. You and I have a plan. I mean, that's just the reality, and sometimes the clash of the wills comes in that, right? Whose plan is going to be carried out? But his plan is evil. It's oppressive and destructive in nature toward people, toward creation, toward community, toward anything that is good and wholesome and lovely and pure, right? He wants to destroy and be against that. See, evil stands against everything that is wholesome, good, loving, beautiful, caring. The devil is the enemy of God and against everything that God is and everything that he promotes. Evil is the antithesis of everything that God is. The devil is anti-God. Right? You read about it in Revelation, the Antichrist. The Antichrist is anti-Christ. He's the opposite. He's the antithesis. He's the completely other. I mean, if you want to go one stream and that love and then the completely other way, and that's the Antichrist. So he is anti-God. And there are anti-God people in the world today. And so if you think about it, we don't have to look far to see the influence of evil. I don't think I need to sit down and try to convince any of us of the impact and the influence of evil in our world. Right? If you got a news feed, it's on your news feed right now. It's in our families, it's in our homes, it's in our communities, it's in our world. So evil wants to propagate one agenda in its many forms, and that's the destruction of people, God's church, all people. He wants to keep people from coming to a loving, growing, gracious relationship with God and others, to keep us from, loving God and loving our neighbors. So all of these things are some of the things that come into focus as we consider our theological framework as it relates to that idea that we're in no ordinary fight. So some of that fight language helps to bring in this understanding, this framework for our theology. Now comes the challenge of what do we do with that focus, with that perspective. As it comes into our lens, as it comes in, as we get focused toward it, what do we do with it? So it's a challenge. And so I would encourage a theology here that doesn't hyper-focus on one side, on evil, or on the other side, overlook it. So think about two extremes. One extreme is that everything is of the devil, right? Everything's because of the enemy. Everything is just everything. All the talk, the language, how we speak, how we consider circumstances. It's all somebody else's fault. It's all the devil's fault, right? It's all evil. So there's that side of it. And then there's the other side of it where, there is no evil in the world. We're our own evil mess. And there's partial truth in that. But take it even further, that there is no evil influence standing behind humanity. Right? So I think I would encourage us to avoid both extremes. So we don't want to, attribute and say, everything is that, and on the other side, we also don't want to overlook it, ignore it, be naive of it, believe that it doesn't exist. So I hope that you hear my heart here. In some circles of the church, and I'm sharing out of my perspective and my understanding, my relationship with God and whatnot, and what I see and what I've read and experienced. But in some circles of the church, it seems to me that the devil, he gets way too much credit for the things that go on in the world. And a lot of it he's probably behind, okay? But could it be that we talk about it way too much? In that sense, we give him glory for the things that go on. We give him credit, right? We talk about it. And so in some circles, everything's of the devil. And so we talk about him sometimes more than we talk about Jesus. We talk about the bad instead of, more than we talk about the good. I was just with some people, and then we're talking about something they're involved with, and they got colds, and so their colds are because the enemy's attacking them because they're about ready to step into something good. Well, okay, maybe, but most likely you probably went somewhere, you touched something that somebody passed on a germ, now you have that germ, and that's just the reality. Come on. I don't know that we need to over-spiritualize everything. That's just my perspective. So I just want you to hear my heart there. So we don't want to blame everything on him. While I understand that some people see a reason behind everything, again, it just might not be the enemy. And so let's just be careful of the language we use, how we talk and how we communicate. I'd rather talk about the devil less than I'd rather talk about, well, your whole sermon's practically on the devil. Well, okay. But just saying in general, I'd rather talk about the devil less and talk more about Jesus and his power. Sin is great, evil is great, but Jesus is greater. His power is greater. Come on, talk about those things more. Let's talk about Jesus more and his power more. I want his power, life, and light to be larger than the darkness around me. And even if I'm surrounded by darkness, let's talk about the light. Let's talk about what God's doing. Let's talk about how he's healing and moving and working in the midst of that heaviness and evil. So there's that reality, and at the same time, I don't want to dismiss the reality of evil. Again, evil is real. Let's not live in fear of it. Let's not give it more power than it should have or be given in our lives. And at the same time, let's not be naive or pretend that it doesn't exist. Okay, so if there's a battle within, a battle without, right? Internally it takes place. Externally it happens. There are two realms. There's a realm we see and there's a realm that we don't always see. And then there's an evil plan, and it's propagated in many of its different ways and shapes and forms. Okay, if there is all of that, then what? Here's how it breaks down into our practical everyday lives. Then every prayer matters. Right? When you're led to prayer, when you're on your way to work and you just have this sense that you need to pray for your spouse, you need to pray for one of your children, pray. Because that prayer matters, because there is a battle, there's a war. This is no ordinary battle. So pray. Pray for your kids. Pray for your neighbor. Pray for the gospel to enter into dark places. Pray for strongholds to come alive with light and truth. How does the gospel move into hard areas, broken areas? Through people who care about prayer, who care about their neighbors. John the Baptist, his ministry was to prepare a way for the gospel to go forth, right? You and I, we prepare a way for the gospel to go forth. We prepare a way through prayer. Right, so pray. Every prayer matters. And think about, too, in that sense, every act of kindness matters because God can use that. Every act of kindness matters. Every expression of love and grace, when you and I choose to act and express grace and love instead of judgment, instead of vengeance, instead of ripping the person up and down, when we choose to respond in that, God uses that. It's not wasted. Every opportunity is not wasted. Every change in direction. Right? Some of us, we were going this way, and when Jesus entered into our lives, we are now going this way. We've repented. We were living this way. We're now living this way. See, every change in direction matters because it speaks to the community around us. It speaks to our family members. It speaks to our co-workers. And it also speaks to the heavenlies. Of a certain reality that God is at work and he's alive and moving and working, and that there is humanity, there are people who are willing to follow after him and say, hey, here I am. I've experienced a change of direction. I'm going to live for you. I want my life to reflect that now. So every change in direction matters. Every transformed thought. When you and I change our thoughts and our habits, when there's a change in our mind, it matters because God's able to take all of that and use it for his kingdom and use it for his glory. Every act of discipline. When you pray, when you fast, when you read your Bible, when you worship, when you change your music, right? We fill our minds, and I listen to a lot of different music. But there's something though when we focus in and we bring worship into the picture and in that place, when we discipline our minds and fill our minds with certain things, it does matter. It all adds up. Every time we put Jesus first, when we give, when we serve, when we love, while we don't always necessarily see the wrinkle effect, just know and understand that somehow God takes it all and it adds up and it all matters and it all makes a difference. There are things happening behind the scenes. Some of you, maybe you're here today, and you've been praying for someone you love for a long time, and maybe you're about ready to throw in the towel. Can I encourage you, don't throw in the towel yet. Keep praying, keep believing, keep doing the right things. Keep trusting. In due season, Ephesians 6:10, in due season, at just the right time. If we don't give up, if we don't grow weary in doing good, we will reap a harvest. Come on, there's a harvest for you, awaiting your faith, awaiting your love, awaiting your hardship. Some of you have been through a lot of hard things, and you're wondering, what is on the other side of this? You keep waiting, you keep believing, you keep hoping, you keep doing the right things, because there is a harvest on the other side of it. So keep holding on. This is no ordinary fight. So if I can leave you with this, is engage. Don't be passive. Don't wait for somebody else to pray that prayer.